Welcome back to Sandman Tales. Tonight I have a story about a haunted house. Not a made-up one which you usually hear, but this one is real. It was a cold, moonless night when I first saw the house. Nestled at the edge of a small town, on the outskirts of the woods, its silhouette loomed like a shadow against the dim glow of the far-off streetlights. A house that had been abandoned for as long as anyone could remember. The townsfolk never spoke of it in detail. They only whispered in hushed voices when they thought no one was listening. "Stay away from that place," they would warn, their faces tense with fear. But there I was, standing in front of it. The air was thick with the kind of stillness that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I could hear the wind moving through the trees, but there was something off about it. It wasn't a natural wind. It sounded almost alive. The house itself was imposing, tall and narrow, with jagged peaks on the roof. The windows were dark, their glass shattered long ago. Ivy crawled up its walls like a creeping disease, covering everything in a thick layer of green. And yet, despite the decay, it stood there, waiting. I'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone in town had. The one about the family who lived there long ago, how they disappeared overnight without a trace. The one about the young girl who wandered into the house one afternoon and was never seen again. I'd heard the laughter that echoed through the streets, the disembodied voices drifting on the wind. But I had always dismissed them as nothing more than superstition. A clever bit of local folklore designed to scare children and keep them in line. But now, as I stood there, staring at the darkened windows of that house, I wondered if I had been wrong. Something felt wrong. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my feet crunching the dry leaves beneath me. The path that led up to the front door was overgrown with weeds, the stones uneven and cracked. As I reached the front porch, the wooden boards groaned beneath my weight. The house seemed to sigh in response, as if it recognized my presence. I raised my hand and knocked, once, twice, 3 times. But no one came. Of course no one would. The house had been empty for decades. I pushed the door open. The hinges screamed in protest, the sound echoing through the hollow space inside. The air was heavy with the smell of mildew and decay, thick and cloying. I stepped inside. The hallway was long, stretching into the shadows. Faint light filtered in through the cracks in the walls, but it barely illuminated anything. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel my heart hammering against my chest. There was a feeling in the air, something that made every instinct in my body scream at me to turn and run. But I couldn't. Something was drawing me deeper. I walked forward, each step reluctant, but almost as if my feet were moving on their own. The floor creaked under me, and as I passed one of the doors on my left, I thought I saw a flicker of movement. My heart skipped. I froze, straining my ears, but there was nothing, only silence. The deeper I ventured into the house, the stronger the sense of unease became. Every corner, every doorway seemed to whisper something. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching me. And then I heard it. A soft sound, almost imperceptible at first, a low, muffled cry. It came from somewhere upstairs. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to turn back, to leave, to forget this place ever existed. But another part of me, a part I couldn't explain, needed to know. I found myself at the foot of the staircase. The wooden steps looked like they hadn't been touched in years, covered in dust and cobwebs. The cry came again, louder this time. I didn't hesitate this time. I began to climb. The upstairs was no better than the downstairs. The walls were cracked, the floorboards warped and uneven. But as I made my way down the narrow hallway, the cry grew louder, more desperate. And then, through a half-open door at the end of the hall, I saw her, a little girl. She was sitting on the floor, her back to me. She wore a white dress, her hair long and tangled, and she rocked back and forth, her hands over her ears, as though she were trying to block out the world. "Hey," I called out softly, "are you okay?" She didn't answer, but she flinched as if she had heard me, and slowly, very slowly, she turned to face me. Her eyes were wide, her pupils dilated in a way that made my stomach turn. And then I saw it, the blood. It stained her white dress, soaking into the fabric, dripping onto the floor. My breath caught in my throat, and I took a step back. Something wasn't right. Something about her wasn't real. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a smile. It was a grin. A twisted, grotesque grin that stretched unnaturally across her face. Before I could move, before I could scream, she stood up. Slowly, painfully slow, her head tilted to the side at an angle that made my spine ache. And then, in a voice that wasn't her own, she whispered, "Get out. Get out now." I spun around, my heart racing, and ran out of the room. But as I turned back toward the staircase, something stopped me. The door I had come through, the one I thought I had left wide open, was now shut tight. I pounded on the door, desperate to escape, but the door wouldn't budge. I heard the footsteps again, slow and heavy, approaching from the end of the hallway. It was her, the little girl. I backed up, my body pressing against the wall, my heart pounding in my ears. And then I saw them, faces, pale and distorted, pressed against the walls, their eyes wide and hollow. I could see them now, emerging from the darkness. They weren't people anymore. They were something else, something angry, something hungry. I knew then that I had made a mistake. The house wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. The footsteps grew louder, and I could feel them getting closer. I was surrounded. There was no way out. And then, in the dim light, I saw it, a figure at the far end of the hall. It wasn't a little girl anymore. It was something taller, darker, with long skeletal arms reaching out toward me. My pulse raced, and I turned to run, but the door, it was gone. The house was alive. I sprinted down the hallway, but with each step, the house seemed to shift, warp. The walls seemed to close in, narrowing around me as though the house was growing smaller. The very air was thick and oppressive, like I was breathing water, not air. The whispers intensified, now like 1,000 voices, all speaking in tongues, all demanding something from me. But I wasn't listening. I was running. I slammed through a door, any door, not caring where it led. And there in that room, I found myself facing the one thing I hadn't wanted to see, the truth. The walls were lined with photographs, old yellowing pictures of the family who had once lived here. Their faces frozen in time, smiling at the camera, unaware of the horrors that would one day unfold. But in each of the photographs, something was wrong. The eyes of the people weren't quite right. They seemed darker, empty. And then I saw it. A photograph that wasn't like the others. A young girl, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes wide, staring directly into the lens. She had been the last one to disappear from this house. The girl in the photograph, the same one. And I realized, too late, what the house had been waiting for. The house wasn't trying to trap me. It was trying to claim me. I turned to flee again, but the door slammed shut. The room began to spin, and I was back at the base of the staircase, just as I had been moments before. The girl appeared before me once more, her smile twisted, her eyes black pits of emptiness. She stepped forward slowly, her hand reaching out toward me. "Come with me," she whispered. I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't obey, my body frozen in place. The house had won. And then I woke up. Sunlight streamed through the window, and I was back in my bed, breathing hard, covered in sweat. I looked around, frantic, as though I might find myself still trapped in that accursed house. But everything was quiet, normal. At first I thought it had all been a dream, but then I saw the marks on my arms, faint, thin scratches, like someone had dragged their nails across my skin. The memory of her smile haunted me. I didn't go back. But the town? It still speaks of the house, of the girl, and of those who've never returned. I don't visit the outskirts anymore. And if you value your life, neither should you. I do hope that you enjoyed that true story of a haunted house experience. If you did, then be sure to like, share, and subscribe. That's if you dare.